Welcome back to Washington Watch. Joseph Backholm sitting in for Tony. Glad that you are here. Very late Wednesday night, the United States Supreme Court ruled 5-4, declining to stop enforcement of Texas's Senate Bill 8, also known as the Texas Heartbeat Bill. Planned Parenthood and other abortion businesses had petitioned the Supreme Court for an emergency injunction that would have prevented the Texas law from going into effect. But Justices Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, Barrett, and Kavanaugh voted to allow the Texas law to remain enforceable, at least for the time being, as the case makes its way through our judicial system. Is this case perhaps the first step that finally brings an end to Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion in 1973? Joining us with the legal perspective from FRC is Katherine Johnson, our research fellow for legal and policy studies. Katherine is also an attorney. Katherine, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joseph. It's great to be here.
Well, tell us, is this really, as some on the left are saying, the end of Roe versus Wade?
This is a huge victory, a huge win for the pro-life movement. It's important to note, though, that the Supreme Court ruled on procedural grounds. That is, the Planned Parenthood went after somebody saying this pro-life advocate is somebody who would likely enforce the law. Therefore, we're going to preemptively sue him. You can't do that in the court system. So the Supreme Court simply said, this isn't prepared to be in court. You haven't sued anybody who's done anything yet. And they did not rule on the merits of the heartbeat ban. With that being said, this is the first time in 48 years where abortion starting at 6 weeks is illegal somewhere in the United States. So I think it showed courage from the justices, and I think it's incredibly promising on the legal front for the abortion jurisprudence coming down the pipeline this fall at the Supreme Court. And most importantly, lives are being saved right now in Texas as a result. So I don't want to undermine what a huge win this is, but I would like to emphasize that it was decided on procedural grounds and not substantive grounds.
So the issue is certainly not over, but I think we can infer from the reaction of the abortion industry and their supporters that this is in fact a really big deal. Now, I want to play a clip of how they're talking about it. MSNBC's Nicole Wallace had this to say about what the Texas law means.
With this law, I described it with Neil yesterday as a medieval state of affairs. It feels like gender apartheid on the medical front for women.
So, Katherine, is this gender apartheid?
This is, once again, a completely insane reaction from the left. You would think with the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan, they would be reminded of what actual suppression of women looks like, but this is very typical from the left. They have a day or two of social media complete frenzy, and then they go about their lives. Whereas pro-life Texans are on the ground in Texas, helping women in crisis pregnancies, helping fight for children to be alive. And so it once again just shows the difference between the left with their complete and utter nonsense fear-mongering, and with those on the right fighting to protect the unborn and actually walking the walk and helping women along the way.
Katherine, this is not the only abortion-related case in the court system by a lot. The Supreme Court has already agreed to take up Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health, which comes out of the state of Mississippi. Is that case is the decision that the Supreme Court makes in the Dobbs case going to affect the Texas Heartbeat Bill?
The Mississippi Supreme Court case, Dobbs, is incredibly important. Like I said previously, in the Texas case, that was ruled on a procedural ground. Dobbs will actually get to the merits of Mississippi's 15-week abortion law. So what happens in Dobbs will have huge ramifications for what happens in Texas. But I am incredibly hopeful and optimistic based on the court. For the first time in many years, I would say 48 years, we have a court that's starting to see there are things more important than abortion and a so-called woman's right to abortion. They showed that in the Texas case. They showed you have to have a proper defendant, and that's more important than ending this Texas law. the procedural legal grounds. And so for the first time, having a court that recognized there are other interests that are more important than a woman's so-called right to an abortion, it leaves me incredibly optimistic for what will happen in Dobbs. And yes, what that will mean for Texas and every other pro-life state.
Agreed. But because this Texas law, the decision was a procedural one, we should expect further court challenges in the event somebody tries to enforce that law, correct?
That's right. As soon as a civilian tries to enforce the law and tries to sue somebody, it's a $10,000 fine. It's civil penalty. It's not criminal penalty. That's when Planned Parenthood will be able to get back in court. The Supreme Court, they've done their part on it so far. Once it goes back down to the district court and works its way up again, they might choose to take it up on merits. But I think what happens in Dobbs will be this court's answer on what happens in abortion for the foreseeable future in the country.
Katherine, last question, about 30 seconds. Should the pro-life community feel that the end of Roe is near?
I absolutely think that's true. I think this is the beginning of the end of Roe. I think we have a court, like I said, that's willing to take other interest into play, that actually has courage. And I think that this is historic. No matter what happens in Dobbs, this is the first time in 48 years unborn children are legally recognized as humans with the right to life, starting at 6 weeks in Texas. And that's something to celebrate, and that's something to have hope for moving forward.
Well, Katherine Johnson, we certainly hope you are right, and we appreciate the update on this, and we will continue to be vigilant. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Joseph.